Hello, Assalamu alaikum. In this video, we will understand about the insulin-like growth factor 1, IGF-1 signaling pathway. So, we will also understand about the fasted state and the nutrient-rich condition of the cell. So, what will be happen during the eating time and the fasting. So, this is the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. So, the fasting and exercise will trigger the higher brain cortex to trigger the hypothalamus to pituitary gland, and in this way the adenohypophysis to release the growth hormone. It is known as the somatostatin. This growth hormone will target, for example, with the liver and another tissue like adipocyte and the muscle, but we are not understanding about that. So the growth hormone somatostatin will target to the liver hepatocyte. In this way, it will bind with the growth hormone receptor. Whenever it will be bind with the growth hormone receptor, in this way, here is the extracellular matrix and the cytoplasm of the cell of the hepatocyte, and this is the nucleus which that contain DNA. When the growth hormone receptor bind with the growth hormone, will lead to activate and phosphorylation of the JAK protein. This JAK protein will docking the STAT protein. This dimeric protein will stat can be a different type 1 2 3, but we are just generally our view taking. So in this way the stat will bind as a transcription factor to transcribe the mRNA via a certain gene activation. This mRNA will go into the cytoplasm to translate that protein, which that is important for the IGF-1, but another also, but we are focusing on the IGF-1. IGF-1 will bind extracellularly with the IGF binding protein 4 and will lead to inhibit this activity, while the papillocin will inhibit this function, will lead to trigger the IGF-1. But this is used for the oncogene suppression and the cancer therapy. Autocrine bind with the insulin receptor, IGF-1 with the IGF-1 receptor, and insulin will not bind because the affinity will increase and the clotho will inhibit it. So remember, and the rapamycin will inhibit the mTOR pathway, while the IGF-1 will trigger the mTOR pathway through activation of the insulin receptor substrate protein. mTOR will activate the S6K protein, will lead to activate the glycogen synthase kinase protein, which that lead to metabolism, cell growth, proliferation, and apoptosis. In this way, the glycogenesis will trigger, remember, through IGF-1. But if we will look the whole detail and whole picture during the fasted state and nutrient rich condition, we can find out the cancer progression and inhibition. This fasted state basically opposite, don't miss that because it is my mistake, where the fasted state should be a nutrient rich condition, so that is my mistake. So remember, this is the nutrient rich condition whenever you will eat more food. So the plakoglobin protein bind with the insulin IGF-1 receptor to IGF-1 bind endocrinally with the several tissue to activate the PI3K to PDK1 protein dependent kinase and AKT to ACL activation, lead to mitochondrial biogenesis. While the nutrient-rich condition activates the mTOR, a Richter and Raptor containing a complex, will lead to promote the unhealthy cell growth, not apoptosis. While the nutrient-rich condition via glycolysis to produce pyruvate and increase the ATP, will go into the mitochondria to produce more ATP through oxidative phosphorylation, and in this way the aerobic respiration will trigger, will lead to increase the ATP to inhibit the AMPK. So the best function of the AMPK to inhibit the reactive oxygen species and oxidative stress, while the AMPK is very important, will inhibit the cell growth of the damaged cell, unhealthy cell. And mTOR will trigger that certain gene will lead to protein synthesis for cell survival, biogenesis of mitochondria, cell proliferation, cell growth, and oncogenes not suppressed. If the cell is unhealthy, which that contain damaged DNA. For example, the fasted state here, which that is nutrient deficiency. So this is the opposite, remember, because the nutrient rich condition should be there the fasted state. Insulin-like growth factor 1 will trigger the cyclic AMP, lead to AMPK activation. And in this way, the glycolysis will decrease while the pyruvate decrease. In this way, the aerobic respiration will decrease. And if the hypoxia will occur, it means the cell will damage, cell will a starvation mode, even hypoxia. So less oxygen in the cell due to some problem or something like more exercise will lead to hypoxia. So the AMPK will trigger due to the deficiency of the ATP. AMPK will inhibit the reactive oxygen species which are released from the mitochondria. In this way, AMPK will trigger the FOXO1, 3, 4, which that trigger the transcription factor like ubiquitination, apoptosis, necrosis, and proteasome formation and autophagy as well as lysosome formation. This translational protein is important for the cell death, and cell death is important for the damaged cell. So in this way, important things you should need to understand: AMPK not always promote the cell death, but the healthy cell will promote to survive, but proliferate also and grow, while the unhealthy cell should be clear. So in this way, the AMPK will trigger to unhealthy cell to die. While on the other hand, the basically important things you should need to understand: the AMPK will activate the certain gene for the cell survive if the healthy cell, while the AMPK gene, AMPK phosphorylation and cascade of phosphorylation lead to activate the certain gene which that is important for the cell death if the cell will be unhealthy. So IGF-1 is not a sensor for the cell condition. In this way, we are concluding if the cell unhealthy, IGF-1 trigger to proliferate it. So the fasting with IGF-1 is so important to clear the damaged cell due to the high sensing AMPK. Will trigger to survive the healthy cell while the inhibit the unhealthy cell survive and apoptosis trigger. In short summary, the PGC1, the alpha, PGC1 alpha will trigger the IGF1. In this way, the mTOR will trigger, will lead to cell proliferation. So the PGC1 alpha is important for the biogenesis of the mitochondria. And AMPK will trigger the deficiency of mTOR, lead to cell death and even survive. I hope you make sense about that. See you in the next video for this and bye.